Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the eDiscovery channel because we're having so much fun talking about hyperlinked documents. And when I say talking, I mean arguing, of course, because we are lawyers. Um, and, uh, and so I decided to go to the bullpen and call in somebody who knows what he's talking about technically, since I was dazed and confused with all of this stuff. I'm joined by Doug Austin. Um, you're not the one who knows what he's talking about technically.
Well, no, yes, just to make that clear, I'm not the. I'm
And
not the. I didn't even make the team. Much less the
neither
bull.
did I.
So,
I wasn't even in the bullpen. I was down at playing A ball and with the Albuquerque Positrons or whatever
The
they're called.
bleachers.
Yeah, but we are joined by Shawn Huston, who is basically my go-to technical guy. Shawn's the managing partner, director, owner, founder of LSP in uh, Philadelphia, and Shawn's got an extensive background. Technically, he started off years ago. Icon, is that correct? Was that your first?
Pre-Icon Knight Rider,
Oh,
back
ooh,
in the early 90s.
the Wayback Machine,
The way back machine.
Wayback Machine, and then worked over the years. I know you worked with a couple of small companies, but also with Merrill and Onsite
Yeah.
at various times. Alpha Lit, um, and then started LSP, and you do a lot of collection, advising, hosting, databasing.
All the above. Data collection, forensics, hosting, a lot of
Which is,
e-discovery consulting.
yeah, which explains the loss of hair. Huh?
Yes, it's been gone a while. I've been in the business a while, and it's been gone a while.
And you're heading in my direction on the beard. You know,
Exactly.
I came across an old picture of me the other day, and I said, "Who's that guy with the red beard? What's that?" I don't even remember those days. So listen, we want to talk about hyperlinked documents in emails, or as some of us like to call them, attachments. Um, um, and that whole argument started, I don't know, what was it, over a year ago, Doug? The Noom
close to a
decision?
year ago, it was. There was the Nichols v. Noom decision back in 2021, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, they should be treated as attachments," and I think even Bill Hamilton and others submitted amici briefs,
Yep.
to kind of have the decision reviewed. Wasn't changed, and then last year, with the NRA StubHub, the first NRA StubHub ruling that came out, people reached out to me and said that was a wrong decision. And I thought, oh, we've got people on both sides of the issue saying they should be attachments, they shouldn't be attachments. So I started kind of covering it and throwing it out there. And I just kind of said, here's the cases we've had so far, because I think we had another one, the Meta Pixel one right after that. And just kind of threw that question out there and got a whole lot of discussion going. And now we've had 3 more cases in 6 weeks recently. So it's really continued to fuel the fire on the discussion.
Yeah. And what really kind of ramped it up to the next level for me, and what I wanted to get Shawn to give us some elucidation on, was that the most recent decision by Judge Cisneros, um, in the Uber case, which is an MDL, right? Um, um, where there was some extensive discussion about uh, Google Drive and Google Vault, um, and honestly, some confusion right off the bat because they kept switching in the discussions, not just the judge, but some of the people, from using one of those phrases to the other. You'd be saying Google Drive in one sentence and then Google Vault in the next sentence. And there didn't seem to be a clear elucidation of what was going on. Some of that I know with my clients. One of them called me this morning, was totally confused and thought, because of the use of the name Vault by Google, that it was a product similar to Semantic Vault, which is now eVeritas Vault.
It's
E-Vault?
eVault, yeah. Forget
Right.
if we, I can't remember if the E is email or electronic or something like that, but it's been
Yeah.
eVault. It's been eVault
No,
for
it's
years.
it's
Yeah, it's been eVault.
E-Vault. because we're all scared. But which is an archiving program, and so there is continuing confusion about what's going on. And then Judge Cisneros focused in on two main things for the point of this discussion. One being, can we get the simultaneous? That's not the phrase she used. What was it, Doug?
Contemporaneous.
Contemporaneous. Yes. The contemporaneous document that is referred to in the original link of the original email. Is there a way to do that? Short answer in Google Vault apparently is no. But then she went on to say there are no products that do that. Short answer to that is wrong. There maybe aren't some good products, but there's a couple of other things going on now. And I must say, and in all honesty or fairness to the judge, that may have been the case when the briefs were submitted and the opinion was written, because the option that's available through Microsoft Purview, nobody seems to know when it went live.
Yeah.
But it appears to be probably within the last few months. I know, because I was working with it, that it had been in beta, and as Shawn likes to say, it was one of those buttons on the screen that didn't work for the end user, but it was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And they had been working for well over a year and a half to work on contemporaneous documents, and they knew that it was an issue and something they wanted to deal with, but it just seems to have gone live in Microsoft Purview premium version, the top end only, the most expensive version only. And it just seems to have been turned on. I saw no announcements. I learned of it from Don Swanson in a webinar that we were doing a couple of weeks ago. So, but also some other commentary that went on talked about there was a product called FEC, FEC.
Yeah, Forensic Email Collector by Metaspike.
Right.
Yeah, which has, which is I think a lot of people recognize as one of the best collection programs out there.
Right.
And it can do a lot, but obviously one of the challenges, you can only collect what the source ESI solution enables you to collect.
Yeah.
And there's the challenge. Like for Google, with it not tracking the contemporaneous version, you can't collect what isn't there.
For sure.
Right. And then, of course, with, M365 and Purview Premium now providing that capability, that's great for moving forward things, being set up. But, but of course, litigation is usually about files a year or longer in the past, where at least yet it's not going to apply. So certainly in the cases we're going to see, I think that's going to probably be it for a bit, at least until we see maybe, move a year or so down the road.
Yeah, and that's the problem with any of these forensic tools, though. Everything has limitations, right?
Right.
Just like Google Vault has limitations, Office 365 as a whole has limitations, Purview has limitations.
Right.
And just to throw another monkey in the wrench, as John McClain would say, the couple of the document management companies are tinkering around with this. NetDocs, I know, has more of an archiving solution, but the ability to grab documents in their versions which is what they do in their program. And they also allow you to grab emails if you affirmatively turn that button on. In other words, they will track not just documents, but emails as well. That's all still very, under development.
Right.
But the point is, I think that we're seeing an awful lot of activity in this space, and certainly if one of the document management companies gets into this, that'll throw a whole other wrinkle into it, especially for big corporations who use, whether it's NetDocs or iManage or I always forget, what's the Canadian company?
OpenText.
OpenText. There we go. I got to write that down and just paste it on my screen. It's like I got a mental block about it. But, if one of those people gets into this space and starts providing a solution as part of their ongoing document management system, that would be really interesting. So I think we're going to see a lot of development this year And certainly, I don't think we can count Google out. If Microsoft is working on something to try to do this contemporaneous grabbing, then Google will obviously try to do that. But let's back up a second. So, Shawn,
Yes, Tom.
tell me, what the heck is Google Vault, and how does it work?
The how does it work is the tricky part. So Google Vault, you know, based on my understanding and knowledge, is it's not just an archiving system. So Google Vault, from what I've seen just through even my usage of it, is, you know, essentially a compliance and management system for the Google suite of software. So, and that's everything from Gmail to Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Drive, all of that, right? So, and it's, you know, it's kind of like I equate it to, it's Google's answer to the Office 365 compliance and now labeled as purview. So it's their answer to that. So that way, you know, again, you have a company the size of Uber who's using Google Suite for their business operations. They're going to need compliance functions, right? So, or those companies are going to go to and use Office 365 for legal hold and, you know, and all of that. So that's what I see Google Vault is. It's not just just meant to archive out documents and email and things like that. So because, you know, you can see, you know, as you use Google's products, it's forcing you to do certain functions in Google Vault. You know, if you want to collect a Gmail account, it's much harder to do it directly through Gmail because Google wants to force you into Google Vault to do it. Same thing with Google Drive and other tools. They want Vault to be that portal for that. That's where everything's controlled. That's where everything goes through. So
would it be safe to say that Google Drive, then, when people are referring to Google Drive, they're referring to active documents, perhaps freshly created, that have not been touched by Google Vault yet? Would that be a safe statement?
I mean, to be quite honest, how they connect on the back end is a bit of a mystery. You know, I'm not sure how that's functioning, to be quite honest. From what I do believe that just from bits and pieces of seeing how things interact and how data gets pulled out, I would be willing to bet that that is the case. That there's, and partly because Google Vault as a product compared to other tools is still fairly new, relatively speaking. So, you know, you still have Gmail, you still have Drive, etc. for the Google Suite, and then you have Vault. So, I do believe that there is still some separation there, and the contemporaneous file issue and things like that. You know, being able to pull them or not. You know, the fact that if it's in Vault, preserved in Vault, you can't pull, you know, linked files. But if you're not in Vault, you can. That tells me that there is some separation there. There is some break there between what's live and what's, you know, preserved or archived or kind of whatever adjective you want to put onto it.
But that could just be a rights issue to abuse
For sure.
technical phrase, right?
For sure.
Right. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I know I covered back in December was, and this kind of, I think, speaks to how they interrelate, is, and what you mentioned, how they're trying to push people to Vault, is that admins in Google Vault apparently can now export hyperlinked Google Drive content from Gmail messages. Now, of course, that does nothing about contemporaneous versions.
Yeah.
It's just whatever version's out there, but at least they've taken a step.
For sure.
You know, to try to address that need that Microsoft obviously has taken a couple of extra steps since they are now providing that contemporaneous version support. But it certainly looks like they recognize the need to get there as well. And certainly it would be interesting to see if they get to a point where they do start tracking the contemporaneous versions and give you an ability to get to those. What do you think about that?
I think, you know, any of these things, again, I think it's an actively developed product, and like those steps are positive, like the ability to do more. At the same time, there, you know, just, you know, kind of like I was mentioning, limitations in products, whatever, whether it's a forensic product or any of these suites, there's significant limitations, and I would say problematic limitations when it comes to Google Vault. So, you know, for instance, we recommend all clients do any type of searching outside of Google Vault. So if you need to do a Gmail search, pull the entire mailbox and put it in your favorite forensic or e-discovery tool and search it there. The reason being is we have done collections in Google Vault using their searching, and you know, that's what the client wanted to do, and so we used the Google Vault you know, filtering and everything. You get the results. At that time, I don't know if they've fixed it, but there wasn't a clear number for what the results were that Google provided at that time. So you export it, you assume those 150,000 emails are what you should have because there's no errors, there's nothing in logs to say that you don't have everything. Come to find out you don't. So, and we were able to confirm that because there were emails that came up as why isn't this email in here in the collection? So going back, pulling the full mailbox, I mean, we found greater than 50% of the emails were not found or left behind in Google Vault by Google's products and searching and filtering.
Interesting.
And it's a repeatable error, and the results vary. So you could do the same search multiple times, get two different results.
Right. Exactly what I've heard happening with people are saying about Microsoft Purview as well.
I was just going to say, in all fairness,
100%.
I also have experienced exactly that in Outlook.
For sure.
And Shawn and I had this discussion earlier in the week that, you know, and just as an aside, what's going on there? Are we just dealing with too much data? Are we reaching the Tower of Babel limits here? Or you know, what do you think, Shawn? Why would two companies as technically sophisticated with as much R&D money as those two companies do, how does this happen?
I mean, Google only has $100 billion in cash at the bank, so they might be struggling a little bit. You know, to be honest, in my opinion, people don't care. They don't care about e-discovery unless they're in it, right? From a business standpoint, I mean, if we're you know, obviously in our world, this is the most important thing. I've been doing this more than half my life. This is the most important thing in my life, my kids, and then e-discovery, right? Like this is super important, and we know from the legal perspective, it's incredibly important. But from a business, you know, whether it's a business like Uber or, you know, you pick some Fortune 500 company, is e-discovery top of mind when they're making requests, you know, of Microsoft, when they're making requests of Google? I would say no. Like it's still, frankly, from a business perspective, an afterthought. Rightly or wrongly, I know obviously everyone in the e-discovery space thinks wrongly, and I appreciate that mindset. But until there's a demand, it's not going to, you know, get the level of attention, you know, from a business standpoint, that it needs to. Now, the compliance piece, in my view, is what's driving the e-discovery function development in 365, in Vault, and any tool. It's more of a compliance as opposed to strictly e-discovery.
Interesting.
But like like you and I had talked earlier, like when you search in Outlook, right? You have an email in your inbox. You know it's there. You search 10 ways to Sunday in Outlook and you can't find it, right? But you can scroll through thousands of
Scroll
messages
down.
and you see it there, right?
Yeah.
That to me is the same thing that happens when you're searching in at least the lower end functions of Purview or Vault. It's I refer to it as good enough searching, right? So is it good enough for the average user? Absolutely. Like, is it inconvenient to have to hunt super hard to find an email? Sure. But is it good enough? Yes. Is it forensic or e-discovery level defensible searching? Not remotely. So, I mean, that's the caveat with some of these tools until it gets there, which I think we're years away, is you have to look at it through that lens versus the lens of, okay, this is going to get me everything I need, including, including like linked attachments, which is the talk of the town right now. But I mean, it's just a product of kind of what we're using, and the scenario for it is, linked attachments have been around for decades, frankly. It's just being more and more used by users,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
driving this call for how do we handle this stuff now, because it's being used more frequently, and we have tools that make it easier to use that, to do it that way, right? So in
Right.
365 products now, everything's cloud, including Microsoft tools, which the vast majority of businesses use Office 365 these days for email. So the need has risen, the usage has risen dramatically. Where in the past it existed and it was handled in a manual way, or both sides chose to look the other way because no one wanted to be bothered or open that can of worms. And so there was like, okay, just get me these 2 files, okay, and
Right.
that was left,
And that's
was
good.
left to
So-
that.
Yeah. And yeah.
Let me-
Go ahead, Tom.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I think the reason we're talking about this so much is because everyone's in the cloud now and they're using it so much more. It's not like it hasn't existed in the past, but not to this level of degree. And now you've got requesting parties who are like, well, I'm used to getting this file with the email. Why can't I get it now?
Yeah.
And of course, the responding party saying, well, it's burdensome and what have you. And I'll also mention that, Microsoft and Google they're kind of focused on AI and so forth. So that's kind of like the e-discovery stuff is kind of, down probably, priority 1562 in the list for them. And Google's giving us an AI overview that tells us to put glue on pizza so the cheese will stick better and stuff like that. So, they're busy with stuff like that.
So let me just repeat something I thought I heard you say a couple of minutes ago, Shawn. If you absolutely positively want to find it overnight, you're going to export the mailbox or boxes and use another tool external to the email carrier, for lack of a better phrase.
If you want to make sure that you're getting everything, which the duty to preserve is what it is, right? So, and
ignore
obviously
That's what it
gets
is.
preserved gets filtered down to what's reviewed and then to what's produced, right? And then whatever tools you use, whether it's a linear review or you're using tar, or you're using the next quote unquote AI miracle that exists in the space, great, but that's the funnel. But preservation is that initial piece. And from a preservation standpoint, as a whole, I think the tools work fairly well, because it's just essentially preserving in place. However, it's the searching and filtering in the tools that lacks.
Okay.
Which is why, again, we always recommend, some people choose not to and choose to go to make different decisions. And that's, they're the attorneys on the, I'm not an attorney, full disclosure. They're making that legal decision on, this is what the case requires, not, this broader scope. And that's okay. It is what it is. Like some cases, that's reasonable, right?
Sure. Yeah, and so you're collecting the entire mailbox so you can make sure you can search it adequately in a tool that's really designed for it. But what about that email box has got links and emails pointing to files that aren't in there. So what do you do from a preservation and collection standpoint of like those vault files?
I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, we still see people kind of stick their head in the sand when it comes to them, frankly, because defendant or plaintiff don't know how to deal with them. So it's kind of just looked over. Just like we have people who refuse to even discuss mobile phones data, right? Won't discuss it because it's something out of the scope of what they understand. So they'll refuse, and this kind of goes along the same lines, or from a preservation standpoint, you can preserve a Google Drive, right? You can preserve OneDrive. You can preserve SharePoint files, and with Purview, I gotta keep reminding myself to call it Purview since that's a fairly newer thing. You can preserve by custodian. And again, there's some, just like with any tool, with any software, there's some level of trust that it's actually preserving what it's saying it's preserving, right? So yes, okay, so we are preserving this SharePoint site, or the data that the OneDrive locations that this custodian had access to. From a collection standpoint, it gets, again, you get more complicated, and then you start getting into what to legal decisions, not just technological decisions, right? And hypothetically, that should be informed at custodian interviews. So the interview with IT, the interview with the folks, the stakeholders who created the policies, that business units and IT are following, like what's stored where, what systems are used or not supposed to be used, right? The interviews with the direct custodians who are creating the documents, sending the emails and that stuff, to find, okay, what are you doing? Are you as a business, sending attachments? Are they linked? Are they links in emails or not? Because it's still not all the time. In fact,
right,
the majority of cases we have, it's actual physical attachments. So what are they doing as individuals? What are they doing as a company? What are their policies? And I would say, from my recommendation is, if as a company you are doing it, or as individuals are doing it, well, then you need to preserve where those files are. If you can't preserve the individual files, you need to preserve the collective, right? You need you need the big bucket. And luckily it's easier to do that with cloud systems than it has in the past with file shares, right? Do you want to collect 100 terabyte file share? No. That's going to be take time and be costly. Whereas hypothetically, in Office 365, or I'm frankly, I'll be honest, I don't trust much of what Vault does, but from my recent experiences with it not doing what it's saying it's doing, but hypothetically, it's a few clicks, and that information is preserved and can't be deleted by user. So in that sense, just do it, right? And then whether it's using FBC, to try and, put things together, whether it's, I mean, we still see, kind of workflows. So, there's technology, then people, and then workflows that connect the two. So, if there's not a technology in place that does it automatically, well, why not, again, meet and confer, and, use the legal minds that are in the room to decide, okay, so these are the two primary custodians for this. Focus on them. We're looking at, this 1 year period as primary. Let's pull those, even if it's manually, right? Focus on them, and each party reserves the right to argue in the future about doing more or whatever, or less or whatever, right?
Well, you really have a fanciful viewpoint of what goes on in a meet and confer.
Look, I didn't say that actually happens, but it can, right?
But, and again, circling back to Judge Cisneros, as I recall, Doug, did she order eventually, look, give me the top 200?
For sure.
Yeah, or 200 to request, which of course can be a little challenging because you could have an email that, you could have an email that says, as discussed, with a link to a file, and you don't know whether that's responsive or not. So that's one of the challenges to putting a number on it and saying, well, you can request this many, because without those files, you may not know whether the email is responsive or not.
For sure.
But it's still important to know the who knew what when of, hey, this person received this file on this date and they knew about this. That happens all the time in cases.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, so you have, say, okay, you could get to choose 200 emails that you pull attachments from. But one of those emails could be a thread of 15 emails that have 12 links.
Yes.
Right.
So are you then pulling all of those links, right? Or just some of it? Like, I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole with this stuff.
You count the 200, right? Absolutely.
And can you even find those manually? So, are the links still good? Are the permissions for the links still good? Is that if the people who sent and received that link are no longer there, did the permissions to that file die with them? So it may exist somewhere, but you just can't get to it because their credentials no longer work, right?
Well, my practice and procedure when providing a link in a case is it's time limited. It expires after a week or 2 weeks or whatever.
From a security perspective, that's a good thing, right? That links don't live on forever.
Right.
So, but to your point, like, you're relying on people's memory then, okay, here's this email from 5 years ago. What file was at that link? Do they remember?
And what version of the file?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Right. And then one more thing that to throw into the mix here, because we assume, like in the Uber case, they were a Google shop totally. But in the StubHub case, apparently they were Microsoft emails pointing to Google Drive and Google Vault files.
Nice.
So it was a mix. So even that makes it even more complicated.
For sure.
So,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So I think we solved all the problems, right?
Yeah, we're right back where we started, I think.
Well, you just tell Shawn to download everything and then let somebody search through it manually.
The answer is it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah. So my closing thought on this was, and I expressed this to Shawn the other day when we first spoke, why don't people just say at the very onset, this is way too difficult from a proportionality standpoint. Yeah, I could do it. I have to put bodies on it. It's not proportional. It's like the early days of backup. They're not reasonably accessible. Current technology, come back to me in a year and maybe that will change. It probably will change. But, I haven't seen anybody fashion directly that argument yet. I would think that somebody would, like, say, this is not, I mean, as you said, Doug, you're looking at these MDL cases with how many hundreds of thousands of emails, is Uber trying to get through? I mean, it's got to be enormous. or any of the other cases, Meta or new, whatever. You're not talking 500 gigabyte PSD file.
No.
So yeah, the the technical issues given the current state. Let's leave aside somebody can do it, somebody can't. It's the only one. It isn't the only. Whatever. What as Shawn said, we're in the infancy of all of this. I'm a little more optimistic than Shawn is that this will get a good solution in a relatively short period of time, by which I mean a year or less. I think these people are working feverishly on a solution to this and are going to try to get it out there. And of course, first one to succeed is going to have a major leg up on everything.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and again, I think when it comes from an e-discovery and forensic standpoint, they're only going to be able to do as much as the source ESI solutions allow them to do. So there's got to be, those solutions have to advance their capabilities. But like you, I'm more optimistic, Tom, that I think this is going to happen sooner than later, because I think people are going to continue to ask for this. And while, Shawn, I know you say they're not as concerned about e-discovery, I think one of the things we have to kind of recognize is that we're not just talking about litigation needs here. Discovery comes into play with investigation. So you're going to, federal investigation, you're going to say, sorry, I can't get to that file. It's hyperlinked. You're going to tell that to a government agency, and
you're going to say that to the SEC.
they'll go,
and that's why,
okay,
and that's why I say I think the drive is more focused on compliance and type of things as a whole, as opposed to specifically e-discovery. I think that's the true driver. As opposed to just specifically the discovery process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, even with backup tapes, because there was a long period of time when backup tapes were relevant to kind of what we do, but even if it was burdensome, there was still a duty to preserve them, right?
Well, again,
you couldn't then go throw them in the fireplace, because they were burdensome to go find the data. You still had to preserve them as a just in case, if things changed, with the case. So, I would say there's still a duty, even though, it may be burdensome to go and hunt all these down, at whatever that end location is. That doesn't mean that you don't need to try and preserve those wherever they exist.
Yeah, I think we've short-circuited that piece of the discussion by jumping right to the discovery and production phase. And preservation and production are two different duties.
Absolutely.
And I think there should be a little bit more inquiry about, well, did you preserve them at all? And when did your duty arise? When did you not find out about this? Especially in the federal courts, that's really early on.
Sure. Well, and as Shawn, as you mentioned with the backup tapes, one of the most famous e-discovery cases ever, Zuba Lake. Backup tapes were the key there, because of their spoliation. They were required to go to the backup tapes, which you normally wouldn't be. So maybe there will be a case like that here at some point, where some party, spoliates data, and then they're saying, no, you have to go and pull from these files and take much more of a due diligent effort with it, because you've done, you've spoliated data over here.
Yeah. Okay, well, there we go. Once again, we solved another of the world's problems. If only the president would call us, we could work out this Ukraine thing. I'm sure. Right. Well, Shawn, any other parting comments? I think it's funny that the two guys with the least technical knowledge are going, yeah, no, they'll fix that. No problem. The guy with all the technical knowledge is going, yeah.
I think the answers are twofold going forward. Number one, on the technical side, those of us in the technology need to continue to try and create solutions to this, whether it's, developing tools, trying to facilitate workflows with technology to address this in as least manual effort as possible, right? But in general, the legal profession as a whole need to ask the question about how files are stored sooner, right? So you talk about preservation with these, that question about do you use or do you attach files to emails via hyperlinks needs to be asked at the very, very beginning when the duty to preserve happens. Ask that question immediately to know, so you don't run into these issues like that Uber ran into. And so, I think people don't know. And that's why these questions don't come up until later.
And every day or week that you don't ask about that raises the likelihood that the document's going to change. The link's going to change.
Sure,
the link's going to
expire.
Sure.
Whether it changes with versioning, whether the link dies, whether it gets moved somewhere or deleted, all those similar things to just standard hold and preservation, right?
Yep.
But the question needs to be asked far sooner and far more often, because that's it's becoming more normal, like just general user behavior. So just like with people text messaging about business, it's just frankly most people do it. Whether they say they do or not is another story, but most people do. It's just a form of communication. So ask that question immediately, so do I need to preserve text messages? Do I need to preserve hyperlinked attachments? It's just part and parcel to what the world is these days.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. Well, Shawn, thanks so much for taking some time out to talk to us. I know you're not watching the Flyers, right? Because they've been eliminated.
I'm a Celtics guy, so
you're a Celtics guy. I knew I liked.
Oh, there you go.
I'm not getting all excited. All my friends were like, whooping it up last night. I said, Dallas has been here before, man. They're a very, very good team with two very, very good players. I expect to see this series go 6 or 7. Easy. This is going to be a tough.
I'm not breathing until the final minute of Game 4.
That's right.
Fourth win.
Right.
So
you got to have 4 wins. It's going to be a hard fought contest. So, but
I'm old enough to know better.
yeah, I hear you. All right. Well, thanks again. Appreciate.
Yes, thanks, Shawn.
The time.
All right. Thanks, Doug.
Doug, appreciate your taking the time out too. I know you're busy and running around doing stuff. So thanks. Thanks. It's been such a hot topic this week that I thought it'd be good. I'm going to try to get this up as quickly as I can.
Great. Sounds great.
I know people want to spend the weekend reading about hyperlinked documents.
Obviously.
Of course they do. Who wouldn't?
Right. Well, thanks a lot, guys, and thanks everyone for listening. And see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.
Thanks, gentlemen.